development, actually. There was a very profound book I read a long time ago. It's the one book that I refer pregnant couples to. It's called Evolution's End by Joseph Chilton Pearce. Evolution's End. And what he identifies as evolution's end is pretty much the end of creative thinking. And as a college professor, he was saying that the ability of the brain for higher level thinking and for higher level creative action had already infiltrated into the college system because some of the college teachers could not actually conceptualize at the same level as they had done 20, 30, 40 years before. And so now you have college teachers who have actually not experienced the full potential of their creative development teaching other college students. So what he does is, in the first third of this book, he talks about brain development, a pretty complicated theory of brain development, which I tell people, unless you're particularly interested in that, don't even read it. Maybe it's the first two-thirds. It says there's different stages. So one stage, of course, is the creation of these pathways, of neural pathways, and that the more creative thought there is, the more of these pathways get developed. Now, in the earliest stages, from infancy, for a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years old even, it's relationship that causes the stimulation of these pathways. It's connection. And the brain develops through relationships. And it isn't until 5, 6, 7 years old where this other kinds of brain development starts to kick in. So now you have the fascination and creativity of storytelling. That's why we have story time here. It's the fascination that is the brain development. Every time you're fascinated, your brain is creating something. And so to read to your kids and tell them a story allows them to think of that story. And what the child will do is she will create stories on top of stories. They'll fantasize. They'll put on Batman capes. They'll put on costumes to play a theater game and be little Bo Peep. And when they are creating their stories in fun and play, their brain is developing new new pathways. Now what happens at around the age of 12 is the way that Chilton Pearce talks about it. There's a tsunami of change that goes over the brain now. And all of these pathways that have been established are now put in place. And now, at age 12, give or take, is a time for concept formation. This is where the brain changes. This is where the child who's been totally family-centric begins to shift, to go outside the family and begin to say, I want to be part of a group. That's the foundational issue for young adolescents in particular, is belonging issues in a group. But what's happening is the brain is development. Of course, you have adolescence happening in a physical level, too. Sexual development begins to happen, but also concept formation. This is where now you can begin to understand geometry, mathematics. Language takes on a whole new meaning because the child is coming out of a child's world and entering into more of a world that is bigger than the she or he himself. So the book, in terms of Evolution's End, is filled with 6 or 7 things that he says inhibit creative thinking. That's what becomes possible. The creativity is there right away, but the higher order thinking becomes possible depending upon the kind of early life education we give our kids. So one of the things that he identifies is premature academic development. He says if you teach a kid to use their left brain too soon, premature academic development, the right brain doesn't get the stimulation that it yearns for. That's where the brain development comes from. So premature academic development. He also said electronic stimulation, which is for sure one of the things I agree with. Premature exposure to electronic stimulation cuts down on creative play. Kids lose the ability to play as they get addicted to electronic stimulation. But if you take kids away from anything electronic, they will occupy themselves. Doesn't matter. Give them a couple of bricks. I remember traveling in Thailand, in the back mountains. We went trekking into the mountains, and we were with a group of village people that moved seasonally as the crops changed. And there was a little boy who was playing like a bowling game with sticks and a rock, and he was totally fascinated by it. He had created this game where he knocked them down out of a couple of sticks and a rock. And so, with the addiction to electronic stimulation, the child loses his playtime, her playtime. That's where the brain development comes from. Now, interestingly enough, it used to be that we would believe that at a certain age, you no longer can develop your brain. Old dogs don't learn new tricks kind of ideas. But over the last decade or two, science has found out for sure. There's another book I enjoyed which is called Train Your Mind, Change Your Brain. And research done on experienced meditators show that by focusing your attention, which is what meditation is about, you actually create new pathways, synaptic connections. So if you want to train your brain in order to develop your mind, you can do it. It's very simple. Observe your breath as it enters and leaves your nostrils. That's it. If you want to add something else on, listen for the farthest sound that you can hear. Listen for the farthest sound you can hear, and focus your attention on the air as it enters and leaves your nostrils. And let your tongue touch the roof of your mouth. So what I'm giving you is an exercise. It's to strengthen your ability to maintain attention. So if you want to do sit-ups, you can strengthen your ability, your stomach muscles, and go for a six-pack. If you want to train your brain, you can do it by using your focus of attention. So meditation, my take on meditation, one aspect of meditation is learning how to focus the mind. So now you focus your attention. Again, the breathing is as universal a focus of meditation practice that I'm aware of. And even if you do it for one breath at a time, even if you do it at one breath at a time, you begin to create a change, and your brain will change. Now, what happens when your brain changes? One metaphor is, if you are learning a musical instrument and you learn a new song, you play note by note by note by note, and you get the rhythm, and all of a sudden you get this, and then at some point you can play the song. At some point you're playing the song. That's the change. You have learned. You've taught yourself musical intelligence. And so now you know how to play a song on a piano or a guitar or a trumpet or a harmonica or whatever, or your voice. That's what learning means. So when the brain changes, you can begin to become emotionally smarter, which means you become more aware of your emotions. You become more able to understand your emotions. If you have a model that teaches you that, this is what the Taming Your Anger with Emotional Intelligence includes. There's a book called the Emotional Intelligence Training Manual, workbook. And the idea is to teach, it's called Building Blocks for Emotional Intelligence. This is what I teach the kids in high school. I'm giving them basic information so that they can begin with this information to deal with their emotions a little bit differently. And you can get that if you go to tamingyouраnger.com. You can go find the Building Blocks for Emotional Intelligence workbook. Some of it sounds obvious, but it languages things in a way I don't know that other people have languaged it in the same way. The idea with language is to make something as complex as human emotions simple enough that you can work with them in a really practical way. And then the other thing we're teaching these kids is taming your anger, which is a method for self-control. Method for self-control. Because if you can learn how to control your behavior when your emotions are highly reactive, you can change your relationships. A lot of relationships head south because people don't understand their emotions and they don't know how to express their emotions in ways that cause no harm. So that's what we teach, and that's what I'm teaching the kids in the school. By the way, I also taught a group of veterans, part of the organization called Vet to Vet, a peer counseling organization. And they are teaching vets and their family at no cost the Taming Your Anger with Emotional Intelligence program over in the library in West Los Angeles on Wednesday evenings at 5 o'clock, if you're anywhere near there. So this information, once you have the information, you get to use it. And like learning the notes in a song, at some point there's a learning and you have a new experience with your emotions. And once you realize that you have in fact made that change, it's very far out to recognize that you've had a new understanding of something. I find it very exciting. For me, to continue to learn new things, especially about myself, learning a lot about my body, new things about the body, new ways of standing and relaxing and moving. It's very exciting to me. So it's that kind of creative learning that is what Chilton Pearce refers to as evolution's end. It's as if people don't really appreciate the possibility for learning once you hit adulthood and you leave school. Go back to education again. So I handed out 2 pieces of paper to these kids today. I've worked with them for about 3 weeks, and I haven't asked them to write anything, and I haven't given them anything written. Today, on 1 piece of paper, I gave them all of the basic building blocks that I had given them over the last 3 weeks. And at the same time, I gave them another sheet that said, if you want to develop your emotional intelligence, answer these questions and hand them in to Dr. Wolf. Now, I would say about 30 or 40 kids did that. What was different about it is most of the time, they have to answer these things. They have to answer the test questions. And so the attitude is, oh damn, I got to just take another test. And I told them very clearly, there are no grades. You will not be evaluated. This is, if you want to develop your emotional intelligence, answer these questions. Because by answering the questions, you will understand the material better. It's all for your benefit. So this is the kind of education I'm attempting to bring to this school, to inspire these kids to seek out something for themselves, to educate themselves. Because somewhere in the educational system, what got lost is that desire to be educated. And the desire now is to do the curriculum as it's presented to you, to learn the material, to do the best you can, and to graduate. And that's the idea. Now, for some people, to graduate means you got to graduate with honors because you want to go to college. And so again, you have to now jump over higher hurdles. You have to demonstrate many other abilities just to get into a good school.